Thank you, Josh. I will now call to order the regular meeting of the MWPA Board of Directors for June 2024. Josh, could you please call the roll?
Fairfax,
Here.
Kenfield, Marinwood, Corte Madera,
Here.
Novato,
Here.
Southern Marin,
Here.
Bolinas, County Marin,
Here.
Larkspur,
Here.
San Rafael,
Here.
Ross,
Here.
Inverness,
Here.
Muir Beach, Stinson Beach,
Here.
Mill Valley,
Here.
San Anselmo,
Here.
Sleepy Hollow.
Here.
Thank you. Number 3, do board members or staff have any adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, we are going to go into closed session as indicated on the agenda. We will take public comment on the closed session item at this time. Josh?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay. Bruce?
I'll be recusing Novato.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, we will adjourn to closed session. Great. Okay, so we have adjourned our closed session and we are returning to open session, and there were no reportable actions taken in closed session. We're moving on to number 5, which is open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Board of Directors at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 2 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting and mute your microphone when not reporting out. Josh, is there any public comment?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Number 6, Executive Officers Report, Mark Brown.
Good afternoon, board members. As most of you, or I'm sure all of you know, June is Pride Month, and thank you for Martina for consistently finding the appropriate splash screen for the month that or the initiative or issue or peoples that we're acknowledging for that month. And I've always tried to find something profound to say, and then I realized, that's kind of inward looking. So rather than do that, I feel we'll just start putting up the splash screen and allow people to reflect upon themselves what that particular initiative people's or what we're representing in that month. Let you guys think about it on your own rather than hearing me wax philosophically. All right, fire season update. And we had a bit of an abrupt start. So let's talk about what it means and what it doesn't mean. And I'm going to show a map from the Sites Fire, which is one of the larger fires of the fires that have been going on for the last few weeks. And I'm going to give an impression of the why behind these recent fires that we've had. First of all, they've all been low elevation fires, not where the snowpack is. And they've been in light, flashy fuels in areas that historically and routinely are available to burn in June. Then we had a nice hot period, as you guys remember. And then we had, which helped dry out the dead fuels. And then we had what's called a cold frontal passage. And with cold frontal passages come strong winds and winds that change directions. So when you look at the Sites Fire and you see all these little different lines that are in here, these are actually a progression map. So the first instance of that fire was this section here. The next section was here. And you see that it's long and narrow. And what this is saying is that it's completely driven by the wind. And in the first day, it burned 15,000 acres, which was pretty much this piece here. And then this last section here is the additional 4,000 to get it to 19,000. And that's just because it was completely inaccessible. So it's not extraordinary or out of the ordinary for these types of fires to occur in June. Are we above average for the start of June? Absolutely. And what it's telling us is that we have a very robust grass crop that is ready to burn. And for June and July, we're looking at hard running grass fires. Probably not getting into the heavy fuels in the higher elevations yet. The fear and what we're potentially setting up for with this is that, especially in Southern California, that doesn't historically have a large grass crop, is that when we get into September and October, now we have an abundance of light fuels that can get into the heavy fuels when they're ready under a windy condition. And that's when we can lead to a catastrophic fire. So above average start out of the, but is it an unprecedented start to the fire season? No. Does it cause us concern for the rest of the fire season? Yes. And so does that mean Marin Wildfire needs to adapt its approach based on the early indications of the fire season that we have now? And I would propose no, because when Marin Wildfire was created, we knew that we were behind the curve in our wildfire mitigations, and we are already putting forth max effort. It's always good to reevaluate your efforts, especially based on things that have been going on. However, we actually reevaluate our strategy once a year with the operations committee, and we just reestablished that strategy and added a few items back in November and approved in this new work plan that we will be starting on July 1. So I feel confident that we, first of all, started our mitigation efforts exactly for the type of the fire season that we are seeing develop right now. And we've actually been modifying our work based on what we've been seeing from our work and based on what is going on around the world itself. Some additions that we had for this year's work plan, for example, is that we're doing pathway studies within Marin where fires are likely to burn with most intensity, overlaying that with our dynamic risk assessments of structures, overlaying that with our modeling that we have done with our shaded fuel breaks, and as identifying exactly where we need to start focusing our work. So I really do think that the adjustments that we made for our strategy for 24-25 work plan is in exact alignment with what this fire season is starting to show us. And on the insurance front, homeowners insurance front, we did make a presentation of the steps that we are taking to help be a part of the solution for homeowners insurance in California. We made that presentation to the operations committee, received some great feedback. In July, we will be bringing that same presentation to the executive committee. And a note, July 11th will be the executive committee, not 4th of July. And then we will be bringing that same full presentation to the full board on July 18th. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to testify to the Senate Subcommittee on Education in support of Assemblymember Connolly's Assembly Bill 2968, which is to create or mandate that schools that are in a high fire and a very high fire severity areas are inspected annually in order to be used for shelter-in-place locations, should that be the appropriate strategy for a fire. I have some personal experiences where sheltering in place at a school was a far better solution than evacuating students under hostile fire conditions, number one. Number two, during modeling, what we showed was parents returning to a school to pick up their children added an hour to the evacuation time. Now, this is going to require a tremendous amount of planning, which the bill stipulates. It's also going to require education of our parents that yes, your children will absolutely be safe, and also the creation of reunification plans with the acknowledgement that we're talking hours that the children will be separated from their children, not days. So we were surprised that the bill wasn't on consent for the subcommittee, but I think the senators actually wanted to say what a great bill that the assembly member wrote in the public meeting. And so that's why it ended up not being on consent. Myself and the fire marshal from Woodside Fire, which Woodside is a very forward-leaning organization in the wildfire mitigation work that they're doing. In fact, I think they're the first community to have a Zone 0 ordinance passed, which took them a year and a half to get that through the process. So that was the side benefit that I was able to meet the fire marshal, create a relationship with the fire marshal, and we've already talked about what we wanted to partner with each other on. Our evacuation tools got a lot of attention recently after Charlotte and I presented to the Transportation Authority of Marin. It was well received. IJ did a great article. We were able to get Woody splashed up there on the front page, I think, of the IJ showing the Ladris tool. And then Charlotte and Ted Briggs today presented to the Marin Public Works Association because the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment provides information that's outside of Marin Wildfire subject matter expertise, and that is how to make traffic move better up and down the roads. And we put a lot of effort into that tool, and we want other agencies to use that tool. So we actually have some people from the public works agencies in Marin volunteering to be beta testing with us to use that tool and the Ladris tool to help improve evacuation during evacuations. During our operations committee meeting, we also discussed the proposed JPA revisions. So now we've received feedback. Let me back up. I'll start with the whole process. The whole process was a staff-led effort with some of the original authors and some of our town managers and fire chiefs to look at the JPA, where we thought we needed to make some changes. We had an ad hoc subcommittee of the board that tackled it. Now we've brought it back to that subcommittee. Then we brought it to the town managers for their feedback. We've brought it now to the operations committee for the feedback. So we will be bringing those proposed revisions to exec July 11th and to the full board on July 18th. A reminder that in this room and also we'll have a hybrid audience as well. Daniel Swain will be here on July 10th at noon to talk about the impacts of climate change and wildfire. He and I will be kind of tag teaming that approach. I'm really looking forward to that. And then we have Ember Stomp coming up in September 7th. I thought it was 7th. Thank you so much. And Josh is taking a point for us on what our booth will look like at Ember Stomp, but we've always had great participation from our board members, and we'll be organizing that type of participation again. So look forward to a call from either me or Josh asking you guys to attend Ember Stomp, wearing your nice Marin Wildfire shirts and name tags. With that, I'll take any questions.
Questions from the board? Catherine.
Sorry. Congratulations, the entire open road program repeated, I guess, last weekend on Sunday or the weekend before, which was all about wildfire prevention. And you were the star, in my opinion, about evacuation, which is a big issue in Tam Valley and also in Mill Valley. Specifics about it. My neighbors are asking me. So that's really important. So those were the two things I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Barbara.
Yeah, just have a question, and thanks, Mark, for the overview. You mentioned the ad hoc subcommittee on the JPA, and maybe I misheard you. Did you say you'd brought that back to that subcommittee? Because I've been on that subcommittee. I only remember meeting once.
It was after the, what I meant to say, if I didn't say it right, we brought it back to the original working group following the subcommittee of the board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Public comment, Josh?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Any further discussion from the board? Great. We'll go to item number 7, which is the consent calendar. The opportunity for public comment on consent calendar items will occur prior to the board's discussion of the consent calendar. The board may approve the entire consent calendar with one action. In the alternative, items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board or staff member for separate discussion and vote. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
No hands raised at this time.
Do any board members wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Barbara?
I don't want to remove anything. I just had a comment that I discussed with Mark briefly. Can I just bring that up now?
Yeah.
Okay. So on the task orders, each task order is about 100+ pages. And having worked in the state and doing master service agreements for multi-million-dollar contracts, our task orders were usually a few pages long. And my concern is that these 100+ task order pages will not be read by North Bay Conservation Corps, the contractors who are out in the field. So Mark and I had a discussion about something like, I think the master service agreement should cover kind of the broad stuff, but why not have something like an executive summary? Because we need to be able to count on that they're going to be able to review and know what they need to do, and maybe they need to refer back to the broader one. But I wasn't going to bring this up, but it strikes me that it's a good idea for us really to discuss, to make sure our contractors know what is expected, but also be realistic that they're not going to read 100 pages.
Well, and after the conversation I had with Barbara, I was able to follow up with Ted and briefly follow up with Ann. And so I also took a look at the task orders deeper again. And so the first page of the task order is actually the task order itself. If you go to pages 2 and 3, while it doesn't say it's an executive summary, the next 2 pages really are an executive summary of the work that's expected. And then when you get deeper into it, that's when you get the maps. And then the bulk of it is our project-specific analysis through the CalVTP. And Ted and Panorama really worked hard to try to narrow down that aspect, which is the bulk of it. And they found that the projects were so diverse and large that there wasn't a way to eliminate any of the items. So, but the contractors really do focus on pages 2 and 3. Additionally, before any of the contractors go to work, there is staff-led training to absolutely ensure that they're following. And then we also have visits of our vegetation management specialists to make sure that they're following the work. And it's a little bit of a heavier touch at the beginning and then check-ins following. So I get what you're saying. 110 pages is a lot to read, but we feel that we have that first 2 pages as executive summary and then the training and the checks and balances to make sure that they're doing the work we want them to do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second.
Can you take a roll, Josh?
Fairfax,
Yes.
Corte Madera,
Yes.
Novato,
Yes.
Southern Marin,
Yes.
County Marin,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
San Rafael,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Inverness,
Yes.
Stinson Beach,
Yes.
Mill Valley,
Yes.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow.
Thank you. Number 8, staff reports. The first one is the June 2024 finance report for Marin Wildfire. Marin Wildfire Treasurer Lisa Schiefman will provide a report on this item. Hello.
Hello, thank you. Good afternoon. We are almost through the year. We're at 94%, and we have in the report, in the notes, any reasons why any of the lines might be over. And the admin costs are at 8.6% of the 10% target. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the board? Anybody? Josh, can you see if there's public comment?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. Any further comments from the board? Additional comments? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on to the fiscal year 23-24 work plan implementation update. Ann Krelock. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I will just run through a few slides fairly quickly. Wanted to let you know that we announced this at previous meetings here in this venue, but now this field tour has happened, and this is part of our collaboration with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo under a CAL FIRE grant. Cal Poly Swanton Pacific Ranch's fuel management training program reaches a variety of professionals and members of the public around the state. And so they have a listserv, hundreds, maybe even more than hundreds long. And they reach out to various folks all dealing with the same kinds of issues. How do you manage vegetation in a way that reduces risk and produces ecological health? And we worked with them to host a webinar a little while ago. And then this was part 2. This was a field visit. And we worked with National Park Service staff and County Fire and others to plan this along with Cal Poly, and had really great turnout, great questions, really good engagement. We were very happy that Supervisor Rice showed as well and was a very active member of the group. You get evaluated as part of the process, and people really appreciated all of the information that we conveyed in the webinar and in this. We also had a few residents from Inverness join us. It was a really great day, nearly a full day out there. We got to show some of the work that we've done so far and then highlight some of the challenges. Really great presentation by Mark and Greg Jones with National Park Service talking about fire suppression efforts with recent fires in the coast. And then wanted to note that we had a special meeting of the Operations Committee on June 10th. The video is available on YouTube if anybody would like to check it out. It wasn't our usual Operations Committee meeting for work plan development. It really highlighted a couple of topics, potential changes to the JPA language, as well as activities related to insurance. So if anybody's interested in that, that is publicly available. Wanted to note that the San Rafael San Anselmo Fuel Reduction Zone project is well underway, and the pilot area, that 10-acre area that we've hosted several field trips to, is wrapping up. So great, smooth sailing in that first 10 acres. So we're excited to be working with San Rafael staff and Marin County Parks and Open Space on, potential next phase. So we'll be working through that and figuring out exactly where and when and how much to tackle next. We'll be doing a lot of public outreach around that next phase, including more field trips. So more opportunities to see the before and then probably during and after for that next phase as well. Wanted to note that we have a lot of other programs going on that benefit the public directly. The Chipper program, of course, got started on April 8th. Well underway. We've got over 1,400 pickups done already, continuing growth in demand. And as always, we're getting great reviews with that program. We have the resident grant program and the planning going into that for a July 1st start date. We've got home hardening and defensible space reimbursement continuing this next year, as well as our pilot direct assistance program. We're getting a lot of inquiries from the public around that, and that will get going after July 1st. Wanted to make sure we're all aware that collecting data on project implementation is really important and will feed into our core vegetation management project map. We're hoping to go live with this map very soon. It's in progress and we're working on a clickable public-facing map on our website that will include little blurbs about each of these vegetation management projects. We want to be as transparent as possible and bring this stuff out to the public, so there's a great landing page, QR codes for door hangers, things like that, to really bring people to this webpage and highlight what projects are happening where, and eventually how they're being implemented and how much, where crews are going next. So we're really excited about this. We've been really diving into project descriptions for each of these polygons and photos and things like that. So staff have been working with member agencies, collecting information, collecting photos, then driving out to project areas to take some photos and really share that with the public coming soon. That data collection piece is really critical. I've mentioned this before, but we're really diving into the data collection piece, tools for collecting very specific information about what activities are happening where within our vegetation management projects. And in fact, had a field demonstration today with ArcGIS Survey 123 and found that it was quite easy to go out to your project area, collect your polygon, and record what activities were happening that day in your project. So we're really excited about that. This will really standardize data collection along, all of our 17 member agencies and make it easy to coordinate with our GIS folks and really feed into that map I just mentioned, and all of our modeling, our data collection, the evacuation route tools, the shaded fuel break modeling, and really feed into, quantifying what kind of effect we're having on fire risk over the JPA. And I will leave it there.
Thank you so much, Anne. Questions from board members? No questions. Okay.
Great.
Any public comment?
None at this time.
Right. Bringing it back. Any further comments? Thank you. Number 9, committee reports. First is Fire Safe Marin. I'm not sure if anybody's Meg.
I'm here, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Meg McCabe, and as always, Fire Safe Marin has been busy, and we have submitted a detailed report that all of you have in your packets. So I thought with this time I would just go into a few highlights that we have. So let me turn. Can you see that?
No.
No. Okay, let me see. Let me see if do I have sharing capability?
There you go.
Okay, let me now turn it on to slideshow. And I just wanted to highlight a few of the activities that we have. hopefully you have noticed or will start to notice what we're calling the wave of yellow, which is the Open Your Report Wildfire Risk Report, which is our campaign that we are doing collaboratively with the MWPA and Fireside, San Rafael Fire, and the Alliance to really try to bring an uptick of opening the report throughout Marin. And you'll see these signs in neighborhoods, yard signs on bus stops, in the back of buses, at the ferry terminals. The de-spacers are out there putting this program with all of its branding. It's the door hangers. Fireside is also using this logo and all of the language in their emails to residents, encouraging them to open their report. And we also have a paid advertising going on, which began on June 14th, which will be in video and in digital, in all the news outlets and streaming services. We have it every week as a full page ad in the print on the IJ. There's also our ambassadors are out in force also answering questions about this. And so far we've seen a real uptick. Fireside said I don't know the exact numbers, and we'll have a full detailed report in a month, but it looks like that this has been quite effective. And we've seen the traffic from our website and from our social media as a big uptick in that click-through rates to the MWPA's D-Space when we've ever asked, have you seen your report? Have you opened a report? We're getting a lot of click-through for that. So that seems like a very positive, all very positive indications there. The next thing I wanted to talk about was that we have been working closely with many of our community partners. And this past month in particular, we've been working with the North Marin Community Services and working on really targeting and figuring out how we can create, really tailor our resources to meet the needs of their services and the services that they provide to their Spanish-speaking community. So we are collaborating on creating a newcomers packet and a parent article for their schools to go for their parents when they do the school presentations in the fall. They've asked us to, in particular, describe what the red flag warning days are, how to understand them, and what to do. And we're really starting to emphasize the importance of red flag warning as a day to check in with all of those who need assistance, and to really think of red flag warning days as the time when we should be thinking about the most vulnerable among us. And because we all know that they are the ones that need extra time and that we need extra consideration about how, if there is an evacuation, who's there to help them and how can we all assist one another. We are also pursuing a grant from the Hispanic Access Foundation, collaboratively with North Marin Community Services. And this will be to really up the Spanish family orientation at Ember Stomp. We plan to do this anyway, but with this assistance, it will allow us to hire many of the promotores and have many more translators and Spanish-speaking docents around the festival, and North Marin Community Services, along with many of our community partners, are committed to being there in force for Ember Stomp. And then out in the community, we are going strong. We have in May alone, we did 11 events. We had 2 presentations and over 700 engagements with residents. And these, as we've been reporting, are extensive and exciting engagements, not just an impression or spending a few minutes with a video or something, but these are oftentimes 5 to 10 minute conversations about residents' highest concerns. We have 26 new ambassadors, new and returning ambassadors, 11 of whom speak Spanish. We have 3 new additions. One is a board member of Fire Safe Marin, Steve Quarles, is now an ambassador. And we have Tom Finn is joining us and has been working full shifts out there with the community. I actually was out there last week with him at the Fairfax Festival, and he was excellent with everyone. And then we have 2 elected officials. We have Brian Colbert and Steve Burdo, who are also joining our ambassadors. So this is really, it's been a wonderful experience to have them out joining with the Fire Foundry, the Firewise, and the D-Space inspectors. And I think I've mentioned Ember Stomp, but Ember Stomp is really ramping up in our plans, and it's going to be a very immersive experience where we will be having, I'm sorry, I was trying to stop the share. Immersive experience in what different kinds of landscaping. We're going to have a maze that will be sort of huge photographs of different options that people can do for their defensible space. We will have a home hardening tent, which will have sets built up of all of many of the major issues and risks that are drawn attention to in the wildfire risk report. And then we will have all of our community partners, all the agencies, all the vendors, which I believe all of whom came last year, plus many more are joining with enthusiasm. And we will have inside the Marin, inside the Civic Center, we're going to have a sandbox simulation of historic wildfires through Marin County. So that will be a new feature. And then we'll have a large demonstration burn that IBHS has done in the past. So, and of course, we're going to have goats. So that'll be on September 7th. And I think that's the highlights for the month.
Thank you, Meg. That's great. Any questions from the board? Yes, Bruce.
Meg, this is great work. It's exciting to see that you're encouraging the wildfire risk report. I looked at this, your home, and I looked at the language, and I was a little thrown off because it didn't connect the home assessment. I mean, we're using the words that we use are different, and I'm not sure how you came up to that conclusion, but that's just neither here nor there, really.
Well, actually, I do want to address that because it was a wonderful collaborative effort with the Marin Wildfire, with all of the Fireside and the agencies. One of the problems that Marin residents were having was understanding the connection between the home inspections, the wildfire, the report, what was expected of them in different jurisdictions and so forth. So there was no continuity of language. And we found that might have been one of the problems of getting people to open the report. They weren't really seeing how all these pieces fit together. So we all got together and we spent about 3 months hammering out the language to make sure that it was all consistent and that it was more intuitive than technical. And things like inspections and assessment were found to be oftentimes in residents' heads more about an assessment or an inspection had more to do with building codes and home value than wildfire risk. And the wildfire risk attention starts bringing this into the work that Charlotte Jourdain is doing with the wildfire risk tools and the assessment. So we're trying to get everybody to think in terms of the same language.
Okay, that's helpful. Where I was going with this is that in talking with citizens, friends in meetings, breakfasts, organizations I'm with, I ask them, do they know who MWPA is? Do they know what Measure C is? Do they know who MWPA is? And 9 out of 10 times I get a what, a who, and they have no clue. And so, and I know that, previously in a previous meeting, Dennis suggested that we start to look at putting a team together to look at renewal of Measure C. But I'm wondering to what extent you're having conversations about, being sure that there's attribution to Marin Measure C, and that it's an initiative that comes from your tax dollar at work, And we're kind of raise awareness, not just of your home assessment, but, basically this came out of your pocket. It's MWPA. They're going to phase out here, and we need to, how important it is just to kind of start messaging the importance of awareness and renewal. So that's my, are you having this conversation when
Definitely.
you decide what you're going to focus on with the MWPA funds and what your monthly newsletters and communication and messaging is? I think it's a critical message that I'm not seeing.
Okay, I'll let Jen address this in a moment, but this is really a real opportunity to get Marin Wildfire out in front. And all of this work is being attributed to Marin Wildfire. In particular, your tax dollars at work is on the graphic that goes along with this, and is on all of the flyers and is on all of the print material and so forth. That's the way we have been branding this. So Jen, did you want to add something to that?
I would love to add something. Good afternoon, board members. I'm Jen Gauna. What I would like to add is currently with the ambassador program, when we're out in the community at different events in different geographic areas, we are talking about the Marin Wildfire and talking about the programs that we have as much as we can, and we'll do more. And I would agree that more work needs to be done to elevate all these programs with residents, but it is happening with the community ambassadors out in the community at this time. And then I would also say that we do have a dedicated section within the newsletter every month, and there is 2 or 3 articles there that promote the work of the Marin Wildfire. And then in addition to that, we're doing some work with the Marin Wildfire's social media feeds, and we are implementing some new and improved best practices within social media. So I would see that is ramping up as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen.
Thank you as always for the great work. Pardon me, I'm losing my voice. I'd asked Mark previously, I'd received some questions from constituents about the confidentiality of the defensible space reports that people get. And I'm wondering if in the case of the wildfire risk report, A, can we ensure its confidentiality? And B, can we promote its confidentiality as a way of encouraging people to actually use it? Everybody knows somebody who has either lost insurance or is threatened with the loss of insurance, and people fear that their data might be lost or shared in a way that could be counter to their interests. So can we ensure the confidentiality, and can we promote that?
Actually, I'll take that one on. So yes, we can absolutely positively ensure the confidentiality, and we actually have been increasing the spreading of that message, including, Meg, was it Monday night that we did the insurance forum? I specifically pointed out in that episode, and we're going to continue that message, that A, the data is secure, and B, not a single resident in Marin has ever lost their homeowner's insurance because of an inspection or an assessment that's been performed. Great point, and we are ramping up that message.
So can I just suggest that when you take a look at the FAQ and the description of the program, enter your address below and press submit, then you will enter your access code to view your defensible space report. You could add confidential there.
Okay.
And then in the FAQ, you could emphasize the security of the data and the confidentiality of it.
Love that.
And it's your 4th FAQ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Jen writing notes right now.
And Mark, thank you for reminding me about Wildfire Watch. On Monday, we had a Wildfire Watch special. I believe it's our 10th show that we've done at Marin TV Studio in San Rafael. And Mark was once again one of our stars. And we also had Amy Bach and Eric Henelaw, who is an independent broker. And it was a very interesting and engaged conversation for 45 minutes, talking about if you lose your insurance, what is your options? What's the future look like for the insurance crisis? And Mark addressed what lowering your risks, what residents can do to lower their risk, and how in the long range, we hope that that will have an effect and be a factor that will play into protecting our home insurance. And he did underscore the privacy of the home evaluations, but also the home evaluations as part of a larger factor of Marin taking the lead in lowering wildfire risk as a community, and that as at a larger, as an aggregate level, should help us in the long run be a better bet for insurers.
Yeah, Catherine.
Hi, Meg. Hi, Jen. It's Catherine Way.
Hey, Catherine.
Great report, like usual. But I had a question. I just was curious on page 5, when you had your views of the YouTube video, there was a huge spike in viewership on May 25th. Do you have any idea what that's attributed to?
You want to take that, Jen?
I think that's the Mark Brown wildfire evacuation video, Get Downhill Alive, which really just exploded viewers. That we've been getting this question and people responded, and that's what that is. That's largely responsible for that spike.
Yeah, because spike, the numbers went up to 5,000 from your usual, 300 to 500. So we got a star in the making.
We have it's over 7,100 views as of today, and we have I believe we have 150 videos on YouTube now that are getting tremendous amount of views, and I believe we have it's got roughly around 175,000 hours of viewing. And we're within 300 hours of becoming named by YouTube as what they call creator. Is that right? Is that the creator term? Which puts it, once you're given that award, YouTube starts promoting your channel, so that you will see, hopefully in a few months, we'll see a huge uptick, because YouTube will be recommending all of Fire Safe Marin's video channels to a much broader audience. So it's really exciting. And Mark is certainly the star of that channel, along with actually Todd's videos on all of the Mythbusters series and the home improvement series that Todd's done also continue to perform extremely well.
I just want to make a comment. When Mark mentioned to me yesterday that Woodside Fire had adopted Zone 0 and it took them a year and a half, I did some research and went to their website, and they have lots and lots of videos, all attributed to Fire Safe Marin. Yeah, yeah.
It's just the real gratifying thing for me is how willing everyone is to roll up their sleeves and give their time and their talents and all of their expertise. When you look at our video channel, you see the who's who in wildfire prevention. It is really remarkable how many of you have all helped out and lent your talents to this effort. So I just find that to be such an exciting demonstration of our collaboration.
Yeah. Hear, hear. Barbara.
I just wanted to mention, I think Fire Safe Marin has done an incredible job and has done an incredible job publicizing our Marin wildfire. But one of the things I do, and I would encourage all member agencies to do, is when Mark sends out his executive officer report, I pull out parts of it, particularly that downhill evacuation, and we put those in our newsletters. So we as member agencies have to get the word out to our people that it's Marin Wildfire. Oh, sorry for that yelling. Didn't mean that. But so I would just suggest to you we don't send out his report, but I look through it and excerpt things and ask our person who does our newsletter, please put this out there. So, we need to be ambassadors in our own jurisdictions to get the word out. And some of it's really simple if you have a newsletter.
If I may amplify on that, I have an action item for our next meeting, which is to come back with metrics from our website. But following episode 3 dropping 6 weeks ago, we redesigned the City of Mill Valley website and added an emergency button to the top because it had been buried beneath, you have basic government stuff there. We put EPC up there and we put the videos there. And I'll come back to you with data to see what the response has been. Also, to Barbara's point, we promote it every week in the city online newsletter that goes out to 24,000 people, and the Mill Valley Chamber of Commerce puts it out. So we're trying to reach as many people as we can. And I'll come back to you with the numbers to see if it's actually working.
That's great. That's a great reminder, Barbara. Thank you. Yes, Mark.
I've got a little, I've been plagiarizing Mark's reports for quite some time, including it in every month in our agenda for the Fire Protection District. So thank you, Mark.
I'm going to make one more little plug that tomorrow we're going to be uploading a new series called Fix the Risk, which we are producing 4 to 5 minute videos addressing the main issues that are found in the wildfire risk report. The first one is called Enclosed Soffits and Eaves, because it's a crazy thing, but the most searched thing on our website is soffits, and has been for a while. I think people are very confused by that one. So we just did a quick, it's a DIY 4 steps showing a crew enclosing the eaves on a house. And I think these kinds of short, really clear, snappy videos will be very helpful, and links within the wildfire risk reports themselves, so people can check it out and see what can be done. And we're listing cost of major materials along the way.
That's great. Any public comment on this item?
I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay. Any further discussion? Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Jen. Great reports. Operations Committee, do we have a report?
I covered this item during my staff report, so I have nothing further to report on this.
Thank you, Anne. Number 10, information items. MWPA Board President and Vice President letters of interest.
Yes, and so we had Rachel putting in her letter of interest as to be the president for Marin Wildfire Board, and Catherine Hilliard entered her letter of interest to be the vice president. And this is an opportunity for them to express their vision for their roles. And then the next step is for the board to vote on these positions at the July meeting.
I will go first. Well, thank you. I am interested in, oh, okay, thank you. I am interested in, going into the president role after serving as vice president this last year. And, I was looking back at our trajectory, we are now entering into the 5th year for MWPA, which, on a 10-year span, I feel like we're sort of now into the adulthood stage. So, and it does feel like that. So there's been so much work, and thanks to everyone on the staff and the board, so much work done foundationally around the strategic planning and really putting into the, our foundational pieces of what has been needed for this organization. And now in the second half of our 10-year tenure is, now it's really focused on the implementation. And how are we delivering on the work that we want to do? And I'm excited to, work on that with everybody to move that forward. I see this, we just have more and more opportunities, as was mentioned earlier today. There is definitely need to be a focus now on the renewal. Now that we are in the second half of our 10 years, that has to be a priority. We also have a priority around focusing on the work that we've done now to build the data and the scientific research that's using to drive the projects, but also to share that out to make sure the community, the broader community, understands how the data is really driving our priorities, and to make that really tangible and understandable for the community. So I'm looking forward to working on that with everyone. And I think this organization and the models that we're using and just the formation of the JPA is transformational. And we're hearing and seeing that across not only California, but across the country. Thank you.
Well, I would consider it a really big honor to be vice president. And I just congratulate Bruce, Dennis, Julie, and I would so be honored to serve as vice president under you, Rachel. And so I've served on the board, the finance committee, the executive committee, and I'm exceedingly proud of MWPA's accomplishments. The MWPA board members are among the most knowledgeable and engaged people with whom I've ever worked. Seriously. The board, together with you and your excellent staff, that's Mark, right, are a model for Northern California and possibly the rest of the state. And just look at our record of accomplishments so far. Massive cleaning of fire fuel from high-risk areas and neighborhoods alike, pioneering scientific information and data, ecological information advancements, working on our environment with our environmental partners, deeply working with them, and major public participation through chipper days, home hardening programs, grants, and massive outreach through all forms of electronic print and print media and our partners, in fire safe and fire prevention. And we're also working on the fire insurance industry on behalf of our constituents. And my constituents are really concerned about fire insurance, evacuation, and making it through, just really, and we have these NRG programs. Anyway, I'm telling you all the things that you've done, but I would really like to see, as you said, the implementation to go further and to support that as much as I possibly can. And so that's why I am interested. Thanks.
Wonderful. Any questions from any board members about these two outstanding candidates? Any public comment?
There's no hands raised at this time.
Okay, great. Any further comments? Thank you both for stepping up. It's wonderful. Wildfire Risk Perception Survey, Mark and Charlotte will lead off.
And I'm just going to pass it off to the brains.
Yes.
Good afternoon, board members and members of the public. My name is Charlotte Jourdain. I'm an independent consultant for Marin Wildfire, independent contractor, I'm sorry, for Marin Wildfire. And Josh Damone next to me is with FairPath Solution, and he was our main consultant for the last 2 years on this project. We're very happy to bring to you finally the results of the Wildfire Risk Perception Survey in the report and highlighted in the presentation today. I know it's getting late in the agenda, but I want to take a moment to thank the many people that were involved in making this effort successful, from our home evaluation inspectors after the season who stayed on and helped gather survey collections, to our community-based partners. You'll hear about each of them throughout the presentation. The staff at MWPA and at our fire agencies for providing feedback on a lot of the questions and the themes that we looked into, and many more. So we'll be highlighting those contributions throughout the presentation, but I want to thank them again here. So the goal of the survey, as you may recall, is to complement, first of all, to complement other existing surveys and qualitative data. This effort doesn't exist in a vacuum. It comes as an addition, as a complement to other efforts that we have previously gathered. In particular, for this effort, we focused on working with community-based organizations to increase the participation of communities that are traditionally underrepresented in this type of effort. And I think this is really important to keep in mind as you look through the results that we're going to show you. This is not the average sort of Marin resident survey, and Josh will say a lot more about that in a minute. We do this because we know the ability to perceive risk is key to engagement and preparation, and that early departure in the event of an evacuation is also key to success. One of the goals is now to compare and contrast these responses, these perceived risk responses, with the assessed risk through our other assessed means. It doesn't mean that one is right, the other one is wrong. They could both be underestimating or overestimating. It's the start of a dialogue, and it's the start of an effort to bring more information, more education, and better preparation in place. We also want to identify programming needs through this effort, guide our communication efforts, and enhance targeted education and outreach. And if we can, create benchmark data to track our progress with wildfire risk perception. So I'll give a brief overview of what the survey was like. We've gathered through our first year design phase over 220 focus group insights from participants who took the time to respond to sometimes lengthy sessions with survey questions. I want to say here that Fire Safe Marin was really instrumental in that design phase and working with us and the community partner, the community-based organization, to getting the survey designed as best as it could be. The survey included 48 questions. 10 of them were demographic questions, and it was administered in Spanish and in English. In total, we gathered over 1,000 responses. And just to give you an idea again about the type of respondents that these results represent, so to speak, 45% of our respondents earned less than $45,000 a year. 73% of them were renters. 64% were Latinx, 22% white, and 4% African Americans. 33% have access or functional needs. 23% are over 60 years old, and 63% are female. So definitely a demographic that is sort of our target demographic for this effort, but not your typical survey demographic. I'll pass it off to Josh, who will give you a little bit more of an insight for each community, what the population was responding.
Sure. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, board members, for having me. I'm excited to present some of our results here and encourage you to look at the report as well for more. So for each of these zones, we had community partners that we engaged with. I'll speak quickly to get through this fast so we can all go home and finish up the day, but there's a lot in here. So for Southern Marin, we specifically focused on residents of Marin City, and we work with the Marin County Cooperation Team. Now, one of the things that we did through the design phase, and then again through the pilot part of the implementation phase this year, was work with each community partner to determine the most appropriate strategy for actually reaching and maximizing responses among residents. If there's a gap in the way that traditional survey and online polling methods and other things can tend to over and underrepresent certain populations, we wanted to make sure that our community partners who have the trust networks in the communities were the ones actually working with us and the residents to identify what the most appropriate strategies would be. So for Southern Marin, this started out as with the Marin County Cooperation Team as surveying effectively every 5th door throughout most of Marin City. As responses were coming in, they augmented this with after-school programs, community events, and other arenas where they had community members gathered in places. So it's a mix of some random and some convenient sampling, which you'll see through many of our community partner samples. In San Rafael, we focused on the Canal neighborhood in partnership with the Canal Alliance. Again, with the Canal, they did some door-to-door. So there's a randomization element to the sample they collected, but they also did a lot of community event work and surveying during other programs, after-school events, and other gatherings. For West Marin, we partnered with 2 organizations, San Geronimo Valley Community Center and West Marin Community Services, who both work a lot together and have a great working relationship to survey essentially the broad landscape that is West Marin. They did this through a combination of neighborhood barbecues, ranch events, food banks, community events, and then of course, again, after-school programs and things connected to actual schooling, and managed to reach a large number of residents that would not have been reached through mailing, for instance, because many do not actually have mailing addresses. Novato You'll recognize we work with North Marin Community Services, incredible organization. And they partnered with us really early on to design some methods to reach their constituents, specifically lower income communities in Novato and Latinx communities that use their services at their center. This was a mix of very specific, we did a community mapping exercise where we located very specific neighborhoods and areas where residents reach out to them, use their services, and then also they ended up midway through this process discovering some really interesting strategies to essentially maximize engagement in the survey responses by going to places where people were already had their time preoccupied. So it wasn't seen as such as an impact on people's actual working time. They were at the laundromat, they were at the DMV, they were at after school events or other programs where they were waiting. So that ended up for them maximizing their response rates in Novato, which was really amazing. Central Marin, we did not have a dedicated community-based organization. So what I should say, on top of all of our community partners, we did our own internal randomized area stratified sample, which it's in the report. If you want to ask me later, I can explain what that is. Across all of Marin to augment places where we knew we didn't have the same coverage due to community partners, and still managed to capture some of those results. So you see on the map, these results are largely due to our own survey processes with, you know, off-season defensible space inspectors and some fire foundry recruits, which was an awesome experience. So I will start us off in some of the results and then hand it back to Charlotte. 60% of all of our respondents selected extremely or very concerned, the two top most options when asked about their concern about wildfire risk to their household. It's a large number. Latinx respondents were more likely to be to select extremely concerned, which was 5, compared to white or African-American respondents in our sample. And you can see the percentages there. 27% of respondents are extremely concerned about getting or keeping wildfire insurance. And this level of concern is not that different between renters and owners, which is, I think, something interesting. Sure.
Okay, thank you. And I will say that not to go into solutions, because this is not the presentation here. We're going to talk about next step in a minute, but Marin Wildfire is rolling out a lot of resources now translated in Spanish, including our wildfire risk report and more content. And Fire Safe Marin's already doing a wonderful job at translating a lot of their resources, but clearly there's more work to do. So there's a lot of data with this survey, and I chose to just highlight a few key points for each of the 5 goals, just to give it a little bit of structure. There's a lot more again in the report if you're so inclined. For vegetation management, 35% of the respondents overall answered yes to the question, have there been any projects to remove or manage vegetation to reduce fire risk in the open space near you? And of course, that's the nature of a perception survey. Everyone defines the question a little bit to their ability. And that's why the focus groups were so important in designing the questions so that they be best understood, but we can never know truly how the respondent interpreted it. This overall county average breaks down by zone and shows Central Marin as a very high percentage. I want to say that the differences between zones here are a factor of both respondents' location, their specific address compared to the open space, compared to the project, but also the collection period. This was collected over the winter months. It was collected before the San Rafael San Anselmo fuel reduction project took place. It was collected before a lot of the Novato shaded fuel break communication efforts and tours were implemented. So what we see here is a trend that probably shows us that Anne's efforts and doing the public tours and a lot of the outreach that we've had more time to do for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break is working out in many ways, but there's a lot more digging and understanding to be done about these results. For goal 2, the evacuation risk, that's probably the biggest one for this survey. Lots of questions about evacuation because it is the main concern. 64% of our respondents are very or extremely concerned about traffic preventing them from leaving their neighborhood during an evacuation. What we found very interesting is that out of this 64%, 71% were extremely concerned about traffic, also reported not knowing where to take temporary refuge. So we think there really is a lot of work to be done here around communication about temporary refuge, staging areas, shelters, and so on, to reduce this fear factor, this risk perception of fear. It's not to say that it's going to solve the problem, but it helps people feel like there's some solutions and people are working on helping them. This overall, again, the overall 64% for the JPA is brought up tremendously by San Rafael, where 85% of our respondents said to be extremely or very concerned about traffic, particularly in the canal area. So I want to take this as an opportunity to show you an example of what we mean by comparing perceived and assessed risk. This slide shows the respondents for the Canal neighborhood. And again, keep in mind, this is very centered around the Canal neighborhood for San Rafael. Darker red means extremely concerned. A little bit lighter red means very concerned, and so on. So that's the survey responses. And then the same exact geographic area with Kerner Boulevard here in the center is what our evacuation risk assessment shows us about the risk in the canal. And it trends more on the low to medium side. So again, this is not there's no solution here. We're not saying the survey respondents are concerned without reasons. We're not saying the evacuation risk assessment is minimizing the risk, but we are seeing a discrepancy and we need to dig further into it in collaboration with San Rafael Fire and with the Canal Alliance. I spoke to Quinn Gardner about this, and she pointed out very rightfully that the risk assessment might be underestimating the fact that although the risk assessment does account for density of housing, it probably underestimates the number of families living in the same housing units, and therefore also the number of cars. We know also that the Canal neighborhood is one of those neighborhoods was really just sort of one way out. And so there's a sort of a baseline traffic problem in and out of the canal. So these are all the things that we will be exploring further over the next year with Canal Alliance and with and all the community-based organizations, as well as our fire agencies and member agencies. Moving on to grants, the vast majority of the respondents, and again, keep in mind, these are not, the single family homes, residents that are inspected many times a year or at least once a year. This is a different type of community. Vast majority of respondents do not know about our grants program. Only 11% of the respondents believe that there was financial assistance available. And again, the Latinx respondents were least likely to report believing that financial assistance was available, only 6% compared to 20% of our white and 24% of our African-American respondents. So I want to just mention here that our grants program is closely linked with our home evaluation program. And if you haven't received a home evaluation program, a home evaluation through which you can access the grants program, you wouldn't necessarily know about the grants program. We know also that our fire agencies are getting ready to inspect more high density housing, including apartment buildings and so on, where the need for defensible space might be less so than in other neighborhoods. So again, just a starting point for conversation to be had with our member agencies and community-based organizations here. On our goal of public outreach and education, I actually had a talk with Meg about this, so it's funny she brought that up too. Red flag warnings. What are some common practices that we asked respondents what are common practices under a red flag warning, and we found that 35% of our Latinx respondents don't know what that means. So we clearly, if we're going to enact a lot of mitigation activities around the idea of a red flag warning, we need to define it for the community. 28% of the respondents earning less than $44,750 per year don't know what it means. 29% of the respondents under 60 don't know what it means. But 14% of respondents 60 and older know to temporarily leave the area due to mobility issues during a red flag warning. So this is the type of results that we're getting, and you can see it's very helpful for us to design and implement better programs. For our last goal, defensible space and home hardening, 33% of the respondents believe vegetation in their yard is a fire risk. 49% believe it's not. And again, 80% of the Latinx respondents do not know what defensible space, whether a defensible space evaluation is. Again, different population, but still something that we will want to define as we progress. So the next steps, as I mentioned, is to meet. In fact, Josh and I will be meeting on Monday with the Canal Alliance and San Rafael Fire, but we'll do so with each of the community-based organizations that has partnered with us on this. And Fire Safe Marin is joining these meetings as well to review the results in detail and design projects that they think are the most impactful for their community. This was really the added value of this survey, is this partnership with community-based organizations that help us have a way in and design programs that we know are going to be well received. And your board has approved 35,000 as part of the fiscal year 24-25 work plan for this effort. And with that, we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. Questions from the board? Barbara?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much. One of the things, going back and reading what the design of the survey was to include inclusivity. So the focus on some of these disadvantaged groups and groups that aren't normally included. But what I didn't see is, and I think that's important, but what I didn't see that this was really a scientific survey of all of our member agencies, which is looking at the broader community as well, with a focus also on these groups that aren't normally included. So I understand that the conclusions are coming out that certain percentage of people, high percentages, don't know about this, but were we always planning on not looking at the broader jurisdictional approach with a focus on inclusivity? Because it looks like to me, looking at the groups we worked with, we were only focusing on those groups that aren't usually included. So I'm guessing this wasn't a scientific survey as far as Marin Wildfire as a whole. And is that what we originally designed? I actually don't remember.
So Josh, maybe you want to repeat what you said about the overall responses that are not linked to community-based partners, just to clarify that piece. But
well, when you look at the percentages that you have, for example, you had something like 66% Latinx respondents. We know that that's not the percentage overall in Marin.
correct.
So I'm not saying I disagree
Yeah.
with the inclusivity. I think that's a great idea. But anyway, go ahead.
So to answer your question, I mean, the survey from the beginning, the survey effort was designed to complement other survey efforts that are more broadly representative of Marin's general population, and to dig deeper into these communities that were not represented well in previous survey efforts. So
Okay.
we wanted this drill down in these communities. I understand it would be really great to have a repeat effort and to survey everyone. It just wasn't included in this effort.
Okay, and we don't have that. I mean, I've been on this board for a long time, but I don't remember us doing a broader survey. Is that correct?
We actually did. Fire Safe Marin worked with, I forget the name of the consultant, but we presented to the board 2 years ago results of a survey that was very similar in question and design as this survey. So we do have a broad survey, and then we have a focus survey to lean on.
Okay, well, that's great. And excuse me, my lapse of memory, but it might be good also as part of your next phase of work to sort of compare and contrast what we saw out of the broader versus the more focused. So thank you for your work. Great work.
I have a question. I think it's valuable to have this data, and it really will help promote communication into those communities, especially by the Canal Alliance and others. My question is, does evacuation risk map to wildfire risk? And as communication occurs into those communities, which may not be on the front lines of wildfire, will that inform their approach to evacuation? Does that make sense? I don't perceive the canal as a high wildfire risk area. It's at risk of fire and it could be profound. I get that. But there are numerous other areas of the county that are on the front lines and at direct risk of wildfire, which is where we're investing a lot of our dollars right now. So I'm just wondering, as you think about the messaging into these communities, does it change a little bit based on what evacuation means when a wildfire occurs in X community in Marin?
And a lot of it will depend on how we better inform members of the community about where they live, what risks they have. You're right, the wildfire risk impact in the canal and large scale evacuations in the canal are probably not as likely as large scale evacuations in Mill Valley. However, evacuations from Mill Valley will have a significant impact on day-to-day traffic in the canal. And should there be
And
a
vice versa.
vice versa, and if there be a subsequent event. And so that's why understanding the wildfire risk in connection with evacuation. And I thought that data point of those who were concerned about evacuating, not understanding safe refuge areas was a key indicator. And that could be one of the key focuses we have for the canal is these are your key refuge areas.
Right. So I just think refining the messaging associated with what it means to evacuate and when would be worth thinking about.
Mhm. I have a comment as well. Sort of definitely related to that. I was wondering if there was a follow-up question. I can't quite tell from the survey, the execution, was it done by somebody actually speaking one-on-one with somebody to fill out the survey? I think that was a nod, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
Yep.
great. And so was there ever a follow-up question? Because the two slides you showed was perception versus reality, right? Of a concern around wildfire and evacuation. So the perception versus reality. And the question really is, why do they think that there's the high risk of wildfire?
So perception versus assessed risk, not necessarily reality,
Right,
because
right.
we'll never know
Sure.
what reality
Yes,
really is.
sure.
but Yeah. So Josh, you want to say something about the process of collecting responses? We had the ability for respondents to provide additional context, and I think you have some qualitative data in addition to this, but one of the recommendations in the report is to, as needed, do some ad hoc, like little bit more focused research to really understand why there's mismatch. It's not something we are prioritizing, but I think to your point, really explaining and trying to discover together. This is the beginning. So to the previous question and to this question, this is the beginning. We now have the data to be able to embark on this process of understanding why there's mismatch and what would be the needed message to decode what the community's needs really are.
And I would like to just answer or respond to a couple of the questions here. In terms of the randomization across the entire county, the way we tried to augment our very targeted, community engaged and participatory research, survey research, was by doing a sample of 800 through an area stratified random sample, which is effectively, it's a public health methodology developed by the CDC specifically for areas around the world that may or may not always have very specific addresses. So we selected a set of blocks, census blocks around Marin, 800 addresses within those blocks. And that's what our off-season defensible space inspectors and firefighter recruits and myself did. So we have a randomized sample within the rest that can be pulled out and looked at separately from the rest of the data. It's just folded into all of the community responses and everything, which is why you're seeing the percentages that you're seeing. So we do have that on top, just to be clear there. I think that was the response.
And I have a little bit more follow-on conversation around that. So I think as we go on, I mean, I know we're specifically focused around wildfire, but like if you ask the community residents in the canal, what is their knowledge of sea level rise and their impact on that community, and how would it apply to evacuation, we may see very similar results. I think some of the potentially the high rate of concern around wildfire is because as a county, we've done a lot of communication around wildfire. And I think just anyone would be picking that up. However, whether it's on the buses, it's on, we've done a really big job and good job of getting that word out to people, but to the point we may have raised a level of concern. To Stephen's point, we got to be able to balance the concern to the right areas. And so I think if we are looking at, we talk about earthquakes and the work that I do in Central Marin, it's very interesting because I have one group that says, why do we ever talk about earthquakes or sea level rise? We're all on bedrock. Like, no, we're not. And so, I mean, the communities are really different in terms of what their needs and priorities are. And so I think it will be really interesting in terms of digging into the data a little bit more for these communities.
Alexis?
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. Pretty interesting. I have a question, not so much about the survey or the methodology, but that kind of follows from it. That's maybe for a future time. But one of the things that struck me was just that there was, there were a lot of respondents who didn't know what defensible space was. And I was wondering if that is related to the status of, for example, being a renter. So for example, I'm a renter and, I have no way of knowing if the property owner is, opening the report, is complying with the report. I don't really have any recourse to understand, what the information is and how it's being acted on or not. And so part of my question is, what is the role of renters in defensible space conversations? What are we entitled to know about the properties that we, live on? And is there, I'm just curious how some of this information might be tied to that, and like certainly, would be interested in just knowing sort of like what my rights are in terms of entitlement to that information.
I'll give a really quick answer because this is a question we struggled with a lot at the beginning of the evaluation program, the defensible space and home hardening program. Actually, because the inspectors leave a door flyer at your door with a code to access your report, if you live there, you're going to be accessing it. Now, what we found is that some renters choose to pass it off to their landlords, and then some may or may not have conversations back and forth about whose responsibility it is or what. But the person who lives there is the one that first and foremost has the access to the report.
For what, I mean, so that makes sense like for single family, but what about for, multifamily units? If you have a 10-unit apartment building, maybe it's, abutting the WUI. Does everybody get that report? Who's,
So it depends on the type of parcel that you're on. My understanding is that our agencies are not yet inspecting apartment buildings. And when we've had inspections in like mobile home parks, for example, we've gone through actually a very tedious exercise for which we now have a process with the Green Info Network to divide what's considered one parcel in the assessor's records into like artificially dividing it into sub parcels so that the inspector could leave one, could inspect only that area that corresponds to that person's sort of a sphere of living space, if you will, sphere. So that it's a whole GIS exercise in the background to get that going, but that's the process that we have in place, and our member agencies have been advised on how to make the request for this. It's just they're not, hasn't been a focus until now to inspect apartment buildings in particular. We get these requests off and on. We've gotten the requests from Novato for HOAs, and we have a process in place, but the vast majority of the efforts have not been directed towards this type of housing, which is one of the reasons we see these survey results as well. Do you want to add something?
One thing, just on the data side, I wanted to say that, well, I mean, we have 38 questions, content questions, and 10 demographic, and all of those relate to each other. And so there's a lot of ability to drill down with member agencies and community partners as outcomes from this. One of the sets of questions I think might be relevant and interesting to look at in relation to what you're asking is We also asked renters whether they happened to be responsible for maintaining their yards, whether they had some level of authority over that decision-making process. And then we asked people what a primary reason for not engaging in defensible space work was. And some of those responses had to do with people saying they didn't have authority over the particular unit, including the number of homeowners. So there's some added depth there that can be drilled down by member agencies as we get further into all of that.
Can I just follow up on Alexis's question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, because I haven't opened my wildfire report in a while, but I recall that there was a consent or something you have to click and agree that you are the legitimate owner of that property. Is that in there still? So a renter who may have a door hanger and see their code goes in to check their report, but they're not the property owner. And I recall there being a page that you have to agree that you are the property owner, so you have the legitimacy to access that information. But maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not 100% sure, but I thought it was you were the resident.
I thought it said property owner, but maybe because if you're a tenant, then to your point, you don't have access to that if it is a property owner, it says. So maybe we can just check that.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that.
I live in an HOA. I've never seen anything.
And that's the challenge that we're working on that Charlotte was talking about, is how to start expanding the program into
I also
HOAs.
think just generally realistically, if you live in an apartment building, you're not going to have a yard in an apartment building. So how would you deal with the fact that there's vegetation around you?
And I think
so-
that's one of the reasons our agencies have been holding off, because it feels like there needs to be a little bit of a redesign to the program there. So it's not so focused on defensible space, or if it is, it goes to maybe the property manager or another process. It's the same sort of dialogue that we're having with HOAs. There's common grounds HOA, and then there is parcel specific HOA.
Not where
lands.
I live. It's just common areas and we don't see it, but
Yeah.
okay, so it sounds like it's a challenge.
It's a work in progress.
Any other questions? All right. Any public comment?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay. Any further discussion? I just want to acknowledge the Citizens Oversight Committee meeting minutes and the Executive Committee meeting minutes and the Operations Committee meeting minutes. Now moving on to number 11, board members' requests regarding future agenda items. Any requests? All right. We will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you all and see you in July.